Hi, and welcome to September's ECR Wednesday webinar, hosted by eLife, the series that aims to give early career researchers a platform to discuss issues important to you and your research career. Today, our speakers will discuss how they combine science with parenthood. The webinar will begin with the panelists sharing their stories. Then, in the second half of the webinar, we'll be putting your questions to them. To ask a question, you can type in the question box on the GoToWebinar Functions panel, or you can tweet us. We are at eLife Community using the ECR Wednesday hashtag. Please also join us on Twitter immediately after the webinar, where we'll be continuing the discussion under the ECR Wednesday hashtag. Finally, I'd just like to let you know that we are recording the webinar and will make it available on YouTube in the near future. Now I'll pass over to Jean to introduce the panelists.
Hi everybody and welcome to our webinar. So I'm the chairperson for this session. My name is Jeanne Salje. I am a joint principal investigator at the Mahidol Oxford Tropical Medicine Research Unit in Bangkok, Thailand, and also at the Public Health Research Institute at Rutgers University in Newark in the USA. I also have 3 children aged 5 and under, and every day I struggle to figure out how to balance those 2 parts of my life. So when I was an undergraduate, I remember being incredibly upset because I came to this realization that I knew there were 2 things I wanted from my life. I knew I wanted a family, ideally a large family, and I knew I wanted to be a scientist. And I got extremely upset because I suddenly realized there was no way that I could see how these 2 parts of my life could come together. And I knew it was something I really wanted, but I didn't know how to make them both work. And I know that it would have really helped me to have more exposure and more experiences with people who had been managing to make those 2 parts of their life work. And so for that reason, I'm really excited to have this panel here today, who are all in various ways combining these 2 aspects of their life and have experiences and advice that they can share with us. And I really hope that some of the conversations we have will help to reassure or inspire and give advice to some people, either who are already in a situation where they're trying to balance parenthood and being a scientist, or maybe when they're thinking about looking forward in their future careers and personal lives, how they might combine those 2 things. And so with that, I'd like to move to the speakers and give everybody a chance to introduce themselves and just spend a few minutes telling us a little bit about their experiences and any advice or thoughts that they would like to share on this topic. So maybe we'll go from left to right. So if we start with Galit.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join this panel. My name is Gayle Aloha. I'm a professor of systems biology at Harvard Medical School. I've been a professor for 14 years now. And earlier this year, I became the chair of the Department of Systems Biology, which is something I'm very excited about. I have 2 children. I have twins, age 11, a boy and a girl. And after doing this for many years, my message is that not only that it's possible to be a mother, a father, and a scientist in academia, but that one can do it in a really joyful and enjoy it. And just like Jan, I myself, when I started the position in academia, I was worried because I knew that I want to have kids, and I looked around and I couldn't see many examples of combining these 2 worlds, and it was terrifying for me. Up to a point that I almost considered not taking the offer I received from Harvard. And then it's at that point, I basically made a contract with myself that no matter what, I'm going to be true to my values and to my priorities. And it's not that I was worried that I'm not going to succeed. I was worried that I will succeed, but it will sacrifice and just pay too big of a price with other things that are important for me in life. So I decided that I will move forward with having a family, will find time to maintain my health, my relationship, my social life, and do the best job I can as a scientist. And if at any point it feels like it is impossible or I'm paying too big of a price, then I will look for alternative careers. And what happened actually that I discovered that being a scientist in academia and a parent, it has a lot of advantages. And I know we struggle a lot with the challenges, but I want to highlight some of the things that actually make this combination very successful. I think that being a scientist in academia, and I'm focusing more at the more independent level when one becomes a faculty, you have a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility. You have the freedom to basically choose the scientific direction that you want to pursue, which is, in my mind, amazing. But you also have flexibility to work anywhere and anytime, which is extremely helpful when you have young children and you can decide, especially those who are now working on the bench, when to stop working, when to go and spend time with the family, and when to devote yourself to work, which is, again, it's quite rare to have so much flexibility. You are managing your own hours, you are your own boss. You are deciding what direction to pursue, and I think this combination is fantastic for a parent. I will also add another practical tip that helped me tremendously when trying to combine these two worlds, which is basically to compartmentalize both my brain and my calendar, meaning that when I'm at work and when I'm focused in work, I'm totally focused about work, and I'm trying to really close any thoughts or worry or things related to family and kids. And the same when I come home and I spend time with my kids, I don't check my email, I don't think about work. Every time when a thought is coming about a grant that I need to work on, a revision, I really close that thought and totally focus on my kids. And I do the same with my calendar. My calendar has these blocks that are devoted to family or to kids or to work. And I try to be very careful about not mixing these two things. And while being at work, being very, very focused and efficient. I would just add that a couple of years ago, I wrote this article, which I think this is why Jan actually approached me to join you, How to Survive and Thrive in the Mother Mentor Marathon. And it's got published in Molecular Cell and includes many practical tips about this combination. I received tons of comments from parents after writing this article, and a lot from dads actually, who told me that this should not be written and read just by mothers, but also by fathers, which was wonderful and encouraging for me to hear that. So again, this is something that is available for more practical tips, and I'm happy to hear the other panelists and answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayle. I read that early on before I had children, and definitely that helped just to reassure me and see an example written in text with some very practical advice. And so I really urge people to look at that if they're interested. All right, so if we move on to David Kent.
Yeah, so my name is David Kemp. I'm a group leader at the Wellcome MRC Cambridge Stem Cell Institute in Cambridge, UK. I started my lab group in 2015, and we had our kids in 2016 and just recently 8 weeks ago. So my partner is also a scientist. She's an immunologist at the MRC Lab of Molecular Biology. The way we broke things up, at least, was to share parental leave under the UK shared parental leave policy. She did 8 months, I did 4 months, and that's a full year off with our first child, and we plan to do it again now. She's obviously at home right now for the first little bit. We send our child to nursery and take alternate Mondays off. So that's the sort of arrangement that we've had, so we can actually spend time with our child, one-on-one, which is quite nice. And then we also benefit enormously from rather far away grandparents, and I think that's a sort of unwritten thing that a lot of people don't realize that international families really need. So my parents come over from Canada semi-regularly, and they sort of install themselves for 3 to 6 weeks. And Gillian's parents come down from Yorkshire, and that's sort of for 8-10 days at a time. And without that sort of help, I don't know how a two-scientist family could properly operate in a foreign country / foreign city. So that would be my take home.
Thank you, David. Okay, and how about David Smith?
Hi, yeah, it's nice to speak to you all. So I'm an academic at the University of York. I'm a professor in chemistry here, and I started my academic career 20 years ago, nearly in 1999. So I became a parent about 4 or 5 years ago, and we're gay parents. So we approach the parenting thing very much from the mindset that parenting would be shared 50-50. I mean, when you're both men in a relationship, it seems crazy to do anything else. Actually, it almost seems crazy for anybody in a relationship to do anything else other than start from the 50-50 viewpoint. But that's certainly the one we started from. And I was also lucky to work in a department that had a lot of flexible working and part-time working policies in place. And so I worked 80% time for the first year, after which we adopted my child. So I took full day off each week, and also quite a lot of flexible working. And I also took about 2 months off directly around the adoption of the child as well, through a combination of flexible and part-time working. And at least at my department, they give assurances to people that want to do part-time working, that when they want to go back to full-time working, they'll be able to do that again when the time is right for them as an individual. And that is a very comforting thing to know, that by moving to 3 days a week or 4 days a week, you don't rule yourself out from coming back full-time later on. And we have 7 or 8 academic staff here who are working part-time contracts at the moment because of caring responsibilities. Actually, because of my husband's ill health, I'm now exploring more flexible working and looking at going back into a part-time working pattern where I'll get more days off in school holidays. Because once your kids start school, one of the things that's really not very flexible is school holiday periods. And they fall all through the year, and you need those days, or you need somebody that can take those days off. And with my husband being quite ill now, he can't really cover those days by himself. And so I'm working with my employer on a part-time working policy that would facilitate that. So that's really helpful. I think a couple of things that I'd like to say specifically is that personally, I'd like to see a lot more dads doing their bit in terms of parenthood. There's still this strange language around dads being considered exceptional, even if they're doing 50% of the childcare. Very often someone will say, wow, what a great dad. And they're only doing really their fair share of the childcare responsibilities. And a very different language is used around mums. And I'd like to see that divergence in views of dads and mums break down. I think the changing legal position in the UK, where dads can take paternity leave and share it with the mother's maternity leave, will begin to head in that direction, although currently fewer than 5% of dads are actually taking up the opportunity that David just told you he had taken up with his wife. So there's a lot of scope for more people to become involved in that as it rolls out globally as well. The other thing is that was very different for me compared to some of the other panelists here is I was significantly older when I became a dad. I had an established career already. I was already a professor when we adopted our son. And I think that puts different pressures on you. I think in some ways it's much harder as an early career person where you've got to build your reputation and your conference reputation. And balancing that against parenthood is probably more challenging than what I had to do. I had a reputation as an academic when I became a parent, so I could step back from conferences for a few years, and probably people were glad not to have to hear me again for a few years. So that's another different thing about my circumstance. But I look forward to answering whatever questions that you might have.
Thank you, David. Okay, and finally, Margarita, I'd like to hear.
Yeah. Hello. So thanks for inviting me to this webinar. It's an honor. So I'm a assistant professor at the physiology department in Santiago, in Chile. I'm a medic as well, so I do some clinics which take a bit more time, which that I would like to. And I am a mother of 2, a 6-year-old girl and a 2-year-old girl. So as Jan said, I was less organized and less worried about having babies. I thought that would come and it'll be okay. And when I was doing my medical career, I think, no, after I finished my degree, I'll think about babies. Then I was doing my PhD, and I said, well, after I finish my PhD, I'll think about babies. And then when I was on my postdoc, I said, when I finish my postdoc, I'll start. And then I said, no, then I'll be too old. And as a woman, then, I mean, you have that biology clock that you cannot be a mother after a certain time. If you want to have your own children, you can adopt, but you cannot be a mom. So I said, well, I'm going to try and see what happens. And I was in London by that time, and I have a very good supervisor. He was very supportive. He had a young child himself, and he helped me a lot. So I took this part-time work. I took the 6 months. At that time, we didn't have that. The father cannot take the paternal leave, so it has to be the mother. And I took it for 6 months, and then my girl started going to nursery, and it was fine until she started being very ill. She's asthmatic, so she was in hospital many times, and we decided to have to take her out from the nursery. And as David said before, David Kemp, we were in another country. We didn't have the grandparents to help. So we were by our own, and a few friends that could help, but not much more. And our friends didn't have children either, so it was difficult to show them what was going on. So then we decided to move back to Chile. We moved back to Chile. It was quite difficult. So we moved back to London again, and then back to Chile again. And in between, we have another baby. And I think grandparents are great. They can help a lot. And in a country like this, where everything is a bit less developed, I think, there are lots of nannies where you can actually have someone living in. That's what most of my friends will do. Someone living in that will look after your children full time. So you can come to work, go back at home at 8 in the evening, and your children will be okay. But being a parent before that, when I was looking after my children, I said, no, I don't want to have someone else looking after my children. I decided to have them, and I want to look after them. So I was like, no, I'm not going home at 8. I'm going home at 5. That's the latest I would ever do. And my partner would take 2 days a week. He'll be at 5, and I will do 3 days a week when I'm at 5 at home. And I want to leave, and I want to take them to school. I don't want someone else, because in a medic, you're expected to be at the hospital at 7 in the morning. I said, no, school starts at 8, not before. So I cannot do that. So that has been a bit of a struggle here in a very sexist culture, where you actually say, no, my children are as important as my career, and being a woman, I can do it as well. Not because I'm a woman, I had to stay at home, and my partner, the father of the girls can be at work for whatever hours they can do, and so that has been a bit difficult. And we have come together with other parents here in my university and have been discussing this, but it's still quite complicated. So one thing that we find really hard is, for instance, that in the UK we used to have, well, from 2016 maybe, these things that we cannot have meetings after 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, because after that you don't have childcare, so you are supposed to be at home. And here all meetings are at 6 in the evening. So it's like, no, we're all parents, so we should not do that. I said, well, you have a nanny, and the nanny stay longer. No way. I mean, I'm the parent. I want to be with them. So that's a struggle that we're still trying to change. But yeah, as I said, I mean, and I think I cannot have more than 2. More than 2 is just, I mean, I like to pretend that I can be a parent and a scientist and a medic, and to be a role model for all the other students to come. But actually, I think more than 2, I'm thinking about the 3rd, but I think it's just too difficult. I'm not sure. So I think that's my experience, at least.
Maybe you'll feel different after this panel.
Yeah. It's really striking to see how different the institutions and the way that, you know, the rights that you have in the different countries, the different institutions, can really have an impact. So it's all very well to say that you're going to do it your way and be inspired and be a changer, but if all the meetings are set at 6 p.m, I can see it's difficult for you to say, I'm going to be home with my kids, but then you have to miss the meetings. And so it's quite striking how we can do what we can do, but obviously institutional changes are needed. So I've got a few questions that are coming through, and I please encourage the attendees of the webinar to send as many questions, however big or small, as small sort of silly practical questions, and also bigger questions, more philosophical. So don't hesitate to throw any questions at us. And so I had a few that people sent in advance as well. One of the things that's come up a few times is, do people have advice at which point during your career is a good time to have children? So obviously 3 of the panel here waited till they were a little bit more established, and Margarita was struggling a bit more at earlier stages. But if you had thoughts on different stages.
Yes. My answer, you know, some people say it's never a good time to have kids. My answer is it's always a good time to have kids. And I don't think it's related to your career. It's related to when you are ready in a relationship to take that next level, or in yourself to become a parent. And it is always like disturbing, but it's always wonderful, and everything will work around it, right? And there could be different reasons why to do it early it's better, why to do it late it's better. I really think it's a very personal decision that should be made more based on how you feel, whether you feel you're ready to be a parent, where you are in your relationship with yourself, with your partner, and you're ready to take that, and everything else will just work around it. I have my twins when about 2.5 years after I started as an assistant professor, in the biggest, time of stress and hard work, and you just make it work.
Yeah, I agree with Gayle. very strongly there. I mean, I didn't wait till I was in my 40s to adopt kids through any strategic reason or career reason. It was simply that I met my husband in 2010. Gay weddings, gay civil partnerships were only legalized in the mid 2000s in the UK. Gay adoption was only legalized in the mid 2000s, and we moved down that path after getting married effectively in 2010, and that's how the timing worked out, and that's when we were ready as people to be parents, and then we made the career work around that.
Thank you, Margarita.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with that. It's when you are ready with your partner. But I have to add that if you're younger, you have more energy. So you have more work, but you have more energy. So something to take into account, because you always think, no, I'll wait for a little bit. No, I mean, I'm not ready in my career yet. I have to wait. But then you get too old, and then a baby, they require a lot of energy, not just being there, but physical energy. So it's not bad to have them really a bit younger, I'd say.
Okay. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead, David.
Just one quick thing. I think the key thing is really getting information out from people who've been through it at particular stages, so that people can make the right choice for themselves. They can hear life stories from people who've done it as a postdoc, people who've done it as a PhD student, people who've done it as a group leader, and just weigh out the options yourself. What suits your lifestyle? What suits the relationship situation you're in? And I think the more information, the more stories we get out there, the better informed people will be about their own life decisions.
I think one of the key differences between doing it as a faculty member and doing it as a PhD student or postdoc is the question of whether you're on your time, you're in control, you're running the lab, you set the agenda, or whether you have a direct boss who's checking where you are. And so that's quite a good segue. We've got a number of questions on that topic, so that's a good segue to the next one. It's a slightly longer one, but I'd like to read it out because I think others will have sort of similar experiences. So this person says, I just finished my PhD in September 2007 and continued as a postdoc in the same lab. Now I'm pregnant for 2 months and looking for a postdoc, including labs outside Spain, but I'm scared about the interviews. What should I say? I want to tell the truth, but will they dislike the fact I'll be a mother in some month? Should I tell them after the interview if it takes place before my belly starts growing? So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So I'd love any thoughts.
Well, this is, I can start. Sorry. This is where I think we had a little previous discussion before we started. This is where I think it's so important to give people the permission and to encourage society to give the permission of combining motherhood, parenthood in postdoc life or academic life. I don't think that anyone should feel apologetic about wanting to be a parent or going to be a parent. Now, it is important to find a postdoc environment that will support that. So my advice would be not to hide it, not so much in order to reduce the chance that people that might know about won't want a person like that as a postdoc, but to make sure that, excuse me, that the environment that this person is choosing is going to be an environment that is supportive for parents. And this is critical. And when I give advice, I had a very similar situation with one of my students who became pregnant right before she went into a postdoc position. My advice to her was to go and ask the PI or people in the lab, how do you react to families, to young kids, to people with, who are pregnant? And if this is the lab that their group meeting starts at 7 in the evening, this might not be the best environment for you. So this needs to be an integrated, I think, part of considering a lab that is right for her.
Yeah, having said that, actually, I remember my co-supervisor. So she was a PI, and she was interviewing lots of for a postdoc position, and she said, actually, I would like to have a woman that is pregnant. And I said, why? Because they're so much more efficient when you have a kid, not just a woman, but when you are a parent, you're so much more efficient when you're at work because you have this limited slot of your calendar that you have to actually make the most of it. So you don't have time to go around and mess around with friends, or you just go straight to do your work. So she said, I prefer a parent because they are more efficient. At the same time, I have to say that, I mean, if you are a parent and you are having a career, what suffer more is your social life, I have to say. I think we socialize a lot less. So I don't stay late in the lab, talking with my students, or just having a good time, or going to the pub, or because I know that the 2 girls are waiting for me at home, so I go straight back at home. So I think that's, and when you are going into a new lab, maybe that social thing is quite important, because you get to know your colleagues and you get to, so that's something a bit tricky, that you have to actually take a little bit of your time to socialize with the people that you are working with, because that will help you a lot. But at the same time, you have to be very efficient at your work. So I think, no, I would not hide the fact that you're pregnant or you want to have a family. The opposite. I mean, it can be something positive, because you're going to be a very efficient person, I would say.
I would also be wary of timeframes. I think we hear a lot of people giving advice saying you should finish your PhD in X years, do your postdoc in 2 years, the clock starts ticking, get your PI position. And I think in many, many cases, people don't stick to that, but people love to give this very specific advice. And if you end up having a child during your postdoc and your postdoc takes 6 years, 7 years, if you're a good scientist, you produce something, you can still, it doesn't mean that, I mean, these rules are very, very flexible. There's no hard and fast thing. And so I think that that plays on the back of people's mind. It's okay if it takes longer and you have children and you end up not staying every night in the lab and it takes a bit longer. So David Smith, I think.
Yeah, extending that thought of Jean a bit, it's there are also, at least in the UK, there are a number of fellowships that exist specifically to help people who have taken those career breaks get back into the scientific workplace after doing so. So if it does mean that you have a career break around a pregnancy, then things like Dorothy Hodgkin fellowships in the UK that are a pathway into an academic role are specifically for people who have had career breaks or unusual working patterns. And there's a number of other such fellowships around. And I know that there are schemes elsewhere in the world that look favorably on people who have had a non-traditional pathway. EU funding always asks you, have there been career breaks? What are the reasons for them? And it tries to help people who have talent to get back into that workplace. So don't fear this idea of straying from the perfect pathway that someone will have told you.
And sometimes that can be an opportunity, straying from the perfect path. So, I mean, as an example, I had to follow my husband to Thailand when I became pregnant with my first child halfway through a postdoc. And it ended up taking me in a completely different direction. I ended up working on neglected tropical diseases instead, and that ended up opening new opportunities and taking my career in a completely different direction, even though it was very much off the track I had expected for myself. So sometimes freeing yourself from the clear track that you think you should go on can also open doors, be an opportunity.
Right.
Okay, so we have a very practical question. Can you please talk about the need for organisation? I'm a 5th year PhD student with a 3-year-old and pregnant with a second child, and I'm constantly trying to be better at time management. What has worked for you?
Oh, I'll take this one. I think Gayle made a really good point, which was the one about compartmentalization and trying to divide up your time between the different things you need to do. And it's just worth emphasizing what a good point that is. And it's exactly how I work. I block out periods of time when I know I have to do childcare, and I don't let anything intrude on that. And I try not to be the dad sitting there doing emails while my kid is playing on the floor and wanting my attention. And I try not to be that person. I try to just put 100% of myself into what I'm meant to be doing. And exactly as Gayle said, at work, doing the same. So it really is about blocking out your time and setting realistic goals for what you can achieve in that time, and going home feeling good if you've achieved them, and de-stressing and doing the childcare at the end of that. It is the best way of time managing, is to block your time.
David Kent.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely sensible. Thing I would probably add to it is just start doing things. A lot of people plan, think, compartmentalize, do it all, but they fail to actually start ticking things off the list. And so you can organize your whole life, but you really, very few people have so many jobs that they can't do. If you just start doing them one at a time, just start ticking them off, the list gets smaller, even if you're not thinking about organizing the list. So just do it.
I highly support that. Like, of the things you need to do, see what are the things that you can drop completely, or what are the things that you can delegate, right? Or what are things that you can outsource and get help? Very much, I like Margarita. I didn't want to bring help in the way that someone will be with my children in the evening. I wanted to be there, but I can get help with other things related around the house, with all the household stuff, and just to reduce that from the list. I understand this might be a little more difficult as a grad student than as a faculty, because the resources are a bit more limited. But anything that can be dropped off the list or delegate, and really priorities are also a key.
Margarita.
Yeah, I think that's the key. Like, if you can organize and delegate things. So actually, it's not just being a parent looking after the children, but looking after the house. So you need to do the shopping. You need to have everything quite tidy. You cannot have a very messy house because you're like having these children. So what I found most helpful was to do everything online. So I don't do shopping anymore. Well, especially because in Chile you don't have a supermarket nearby. So we live in suburbs where everything is far away, and so shopping will be online. Clothes will be online. So my daughter has to go dress up as a giraffe next week online. So I got everything online, and everything got delivered to my house. And in the evenings, I will sort of things. So I'll do the giraffe costume, but I will first of all order everything from that will be delivered at home. And then the problem is when do you do that? When you order all these things online, which takes some time. So actually, for me, it's in the evenings when the girls are asleep. I finish my work, and then before going to sleep, I'll do all this online shopping or organize things, but actually have a time slot to do that. Otherwise, it keeps on your mind like doing things that you have to be done, but you never do it. So I try to do as much as I can from my phone and in the evening at between 9 and 10, for instance. That helped me a lot.
Okay, so moving on to the next thing, a few kind of related questions that are coming up, which is one, just thinking about conferences and travel. So a few people have asked, is childcare provided at conferences? And then another question, how do you manage evening events and especially travel events if you have to travel away from children? And so do you have thoughts or advice on that? Yeah, David Smith.
Yeah, I'm happy to go on that. So the very big conferences, particularly in the US, will have childcare associated. So in my field, that would be the American Chemical Society meeting. That's a meeting with 13,000 delegates. So this is very, very big. And they do have Camp ACS, and you can drop your kids off at 8 in the morning and pick them up at 6 in the evening, and you can have your days to do conferencing. But that's still a rarity, I would say, and it's only offered typically at very big conferences. We try here at my own university, whenever we have a conference, to offer childcare to kids 6 and under, because we have a nursery on campus that we open up to delegates of conferences, as long as they have space in the nursery to do that. And so there will be conferences increasingly trying to offer childcare. I think evenings are often a lot more difficult, and the socializing bit of conference is a lot more difficult because it's much harder to offer childcare as a conference organizer for that period of time, because professional childcare bodies often work in the daytimes, officially registered nurseries and things. So it's harder. Actually, from my perspective, I've done far less travel since I became a dad. I've cut down massively. So I was probably spending 40 days away from York on the road, 40 nights away every year doing conferences, collaborations, trips. I now, as a dad, pick one conference a year. And recently, as my husband's health has declined, I can't spend more than a night away from home, actually. So that'll be a meeting in the UK somewhere where it's a night away, typically. And so sometimes you do have to compromise on those things as well. And the childcare opportunities are not as good as they should be.
Yeah, thank you. When my kids were young, I tried to travel with them to conferences. For me personally, it just didn't work. It was just too challenging. I felt like I'm missing on both worlds. I'm at the talks and I'm just looking at the program and thinking, okay, where can I cut and how can I go and be with the family? And then I just felt like I'm not spending enough time with the family. Then when it was socializing, I spent time with the family and felt like it's a missed opportunity to network and to chat with my colleagues. So I ended these conferences exhausted and just feeling like nothing was achieved. So I actually made a decision to separate family trips and vacation versus work trips, and just, each person needs to work with their partner to see how this can work. I couldn't travel much when I had kids, and I was worried that it's going to affect my promotion because it would seem as if I'm not invited enough. The recommendation that I got from my institute is actually to keep a list of all the places that invited me and that I had to say no to because I had young kids. And that was reassuring. Okay, at the end, there wasn't a big need for that because even a small, I was very picky to where I'm going, right? But even a small number of high impacted international conferences were considered enough for the promotion process. So I think being very selective to where you go is important. I would add one thing. For the last few years, I've been an organizer of the Quantitative Biology Conference in Hawaii. This is one of the most family-friendly conferences I've ever been at. And this is one of the conferences that I actually enjoy bringing my kids. Now they're also a bit older. This is how we advertise it. So the fun thing is that a lot of people bring their families. So there are just tons of spouses and partners with kids around that can hang out while the scientists are in their science session. We also have kids-friendly sessions. We have demonstration for kids during the break. We have talks for kids. We see it as an opportunity to encourage our children to become scientists and just expose them to our world. A lot of effort in going into making this a kids-friendly conference is wonderful. I hope to see more like this.
That's really great. That's a really great thing to hear about. I'd also just add one point that for those who don't yet have children, we haven't touched on this, but children and the demands change as the children's change in age. And
Exactly.
So we're talking about newborns is very different from the challenges and opportunities of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. So I've traveled to conferences a lot with newborns, 0 to 3 months, because at that point you strap them on, you walk around, nobody notices they're there, you're breastfeeding, it's fine. Whereas the challenges with a 2-year-old is obviously fairly different, that they might demand a bit more attention. And so just being aware that it's not your life is over as soon as you have a child, your life changes and has different challenges as those children get older. Sorry, Margarita, you had something to add.
That's a good point. Actually, yeah, I did some conference with breastfeeding a baby. It's fine, actually. I mean, people don't mind. Some people will say something, but so it's okay. I mean, I didn't care too much. But with an older one, it's quite difficult. So, yeah, I think I decided at first I did some conference with the children, and then we decided to split. So my husband is also a scientist, and he travels a lot. But I try to do one a year. He does a bit more. And not together. So we have not traveled together for many years now. But for instance, I just came back from the US, from Boston actually, from a conference, and we met at the airport with my husband, and he handed me off the children, and he tried to Brazil, and he's coming back tonight. So it's, I mean, you have to get organized and try. Yeah, you cannot go to every single conference, but still, I mean, I think it's better to go by yourself, not with children, because you can make more out of it, because you can socialize and do all the networking that you cannot do with children.
David Kent.
Yeah, so I mean, a common theme across these answers, I think, has really been communication with your partner. And I think no matter what they do, just being very clear about what's a key priority thing that you need to do for your career and what might be a little more fun. You get most of the former and a few of the latter. And those sorts of conversations are hard, but the better the communication is, the more time you can carve out for each other to be able to spend that time together and make sure your relationship is intact, the easier your road will be, I think.
I have a comment that came in from one of the listeners just about the childcare conferences, from Sandra, saying a good model is the American Society for Cell Biology. We've heard that's pretty similar to your American Society one, where the Childcare Finance Awards cover childcare back home or at a conference, and they're available through the Women in Cell Biology Committee. I've also had a good experience with American Society of Microbiology, so I think these big meetings, again, have those. Okay, so this is again sort of linking with the different ages. So we have one person who says, I'm a postdoc and have a 5-month-old and have been back to work for about 3.5 months. Deep down, I know I'm making progress at work, but I feel so distracted and unproductive. Was there a time or an age where you felt you were really back in the swing of things at work? Maybe David Kent with a 7-week-old has got something to say.
Yeah, I would say I hit that nice productive stage with lots of nighttime sleeps, and then it all went away. I think you're going to be tired with kids. That's the reality. And I don't think there's a single clear path that says, this is the time when children will sleep, because that's also incredibly unpredictable, and every child in every family is even different. So I don't think there's a correct answer, but I will say that in my own experience, at least, there were peaks and troughs. And when you're in the very bad trough and you think it'll never get better, that's when they tend to just sleep through the night and give you a break. They can push you right to that limit, and then say, okay, we're all okay again. I don't think there's a really good answer here, because the children are so different themselves.
Yeah, I also think that, as you said, the challenges, they change with time. Now, a lot of people say it gets easier, and I don't want to change this belief. I think at the physical level, it gets easier, absolutely. And related to sleeping through the night and just not needing to care physically for a newborn. I think a 6-month-old, as this person described, this is really difficult physically. So it does get easier, I think, after the first or second year. But kids need you all the time, and the needs, they change with time. And so it takes time to feel that things are balanced. And exactly as David said, there will be times that the balance is completely shaken, and then you'll find it again.
David Smith.
Yeah, we adopted our son, and he was nearly 2 when he moved in to live with us. And so we didn't go through that sleepless night period, because he came to us sleeping through the night, actually, from his foster parents. But then he hit the house walking, talking, running, pulling things off shelves from day one. And of course, coming with the sort of trauma of having been in a background where it wasn't safe for him to stay, and having had to go into foster care, and then having had to come on to us through multiple different families. And so the things that we were dealing with were probably different to those physical things. And it's just to emphasize that point, that every parental experience is very different as well, and every kid is very different. Some kids will sit really quietly and amuse themselves with a toy for 2 hours, and another kid will be bouncing off the walls, and some kids will eat anything you put in front of them, and other kids won't. And it's really, that's the cool bit about parenthood. It's your journey with your child, and in a way, those things seem super frustrating at the time that you face them all. They're really difficult, but actually, I think when you look back on it, they're the things that you'll also feel they're the rites of passage of being a parent. They're sort of the bits you look back on as well and remember. And as a couple, you talk about those, and they make you stronger as parents. So, they're not all bad things.
I'd also add, this person, they said they're back 3.5 months, which is not very long yet. And so it takes time just to find the balance, even, whether you're thinking about your child when you're at work, and just figuring out exactly the balance in terms of time and in terms of emotional, where your mind is on your science and when your mind is on your child. And so
I also want to add that this person shouldn't be so harsh on themselves. I think we need to keep things in perspective, understand that our career has at least 30, 40, sometimes more years, and the years that the kids are young it's short. Like, it may seem like forever, but it's short, and it goes really quickly. And so to put things in perspective, there's just many more years to focus on your career, and it's really okay even if things are not moving in the pace that this person used to. I think not being harsh on yourself is also important.
I think that's really true. Margarita.
There's a quick thing that maybe when you're a first-time mom and the baby is still very young, in my experience, I worry a lot. So not with my second one, but with my first one, I worried that she was going to die at any time, any minute, all the time. And when she was in childcare, I was worrying about her all the time. And I think that, I don't know, it gets better with time. So now your brain is with your baby, but then it won't be that much. It will get better, I think.
Yeah. And I like Gayle's point of the longevity. It's long and these years are short, and just keeping that in mind. You can crash and burn for a few years and you can still pick yourself up. Worst case scenario, time will go on afterwards. So David Kent, sorry. Oh, David Kent, can we hear you?
Mute button. Sorry. Trying to keep the airplanes and whatnot out of your earshot. I'm just going to pick up on that. I think that it is challenging and we're all examples of people who stay on the path. And Galit in particular, you climbed the ladder very high, and you can show that it can work. But I guess what the listeners don't see on this panel, as it's comprised, is stories of how it doesn't work. And I'm sure we all know people who had kids and left science. And if the people who are asking these types of questions at the postdoctoral level, at the PhD level, are concerned about, that journey, then this panel might not be able to answer that question in complete form, because there will be many people who will make the choice that has been put in front of us by society in many states, in many shapes and forms, and that's tough. And I don't know how we can get a good answer for that, but there are definitely people who leave academic science because of children, and it does happen.
And can I just refer to this comment, David? I want us to be careful not to react to this as a failure. I think that there are many, many options to combine family with career, which is outside academia. And as academic, we give the message that this is the only path because it's the only path that we know. But there are many other options, and it might not be the best or the right for everyone. And we need brilliant people everywhere in many other sectors. And so I think it's a very personal decision. And if one makes the decision to explore other options, it should not be viewed as a failure, but should be viewed as this might be a better choice for them.
I think that's a really important to make. And even if those decisions are made, for professional reasons, or because you want to spend more time with your children and you want to have something where you can be off during the holidays, or if it is purely for the child reason that you don't want to be an academic, that should be okay as well. And I think academics as a whole need to make this point more strongly, that academia is not the only path. Margarita.
Yeah, I have an example of that. So a good friend of mine, we did a PhD together. She was really good. She was brilliant and a most amazing PhD student. And she did a postdoc and then had children and decided to give up science and just move back to her little town, the British one will know, Whitstable, by the seacoast, and stay there because her husband wanted to be there and whatever. And I said, like, why? I mean, she was such a waste. She's amazing. She's such a good scientist, and she'll be there as just looking after the children. And actually, looking backwards now, she's got 3 children. She opened a shop. They do very well in Whitstable. They have a great life, a great quality of life. And it was not a bad decision, I have to say. At that time, it sounded horrible. I said, like, we're going to miss Rose. She's such a good scientist. All science will miss her. But she is a very good mom as well, and she is a very good shopkeeper, and she's having a good life. So, I mean, I think we can all have different lives, and that's fine. It's not a failure. It's just a different way of doing things.
Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next question, which is about having difficult conversations. So people ask, how do you talk to the PI mentor about setting expectations? And I think this relates way back to one of the early questions about during the interview. And then a related question is someone who says, should family planning come up during an interview or when discussing long-term project goals? So not talking about being pregnant, but sort of saying, I would like to have a family at some point in X years. And at what point should you discuss that with your colleagues, with your boss, especially with your boss? Do people have thoughts on that? Yep, David Kemp.
I mean, this is really tough, right? Certainly an interview completely inappropriate for the employer to ask that kind of question. But equally, I think being upfront about plans is useful. But what I would maybe suggest is this is where the power of something like second mentors for postdocs and PhD students can come in. Someone who's not your direct supervisor, but has a partially vested interest in your success. So if you can go and ask somebody who's senior in the department, this is what I would like to do, you can get quite a lot of advice as if you were their postdoc, but you're not actually revealing anything to your boss. And so that's a good way of getting the advice you need without actually having to out your plans. And I mean, the reality is, of course, you can't actually plan when you have a child, as many of us will know. This is, you can try, and things might work, and things might not work, and it might be a year later, 2 years later, it might be 3 months earlier. You just don't know. And so there are excellent times to plan, but children surprise us all when they come.
Kelly.
I also think it might be good to distinguish between talking about it as an interview or talking about it while you're already in a lab. I agree that these are not, it's not something that if you don't have children and you just want to discuss, you don't want to discuss your family plans perhaps with a potential lab. But as I said earlier, you may want to get a sense from other members in the lab and just the culture. Is this lab a family friendly, supportive lab? And this you can get from talking with other people in the lab and the department and the PI. Once you are in a lab and you want to have a conversation like this with the PI, I don't think anyone should ask permission from their PI to become pregnant or to have a family. This is totally their decision. And as David said, even if they think they can control that, there's a lot of factors that cannot be controlled. Once you get to a situation that you know you are expecting children, yes, I think it is important to have this conversation and to think together how to best plan the next several months before the baby is born or during the maternity leave or afterwards in order to make it most efficient for all sides involved. How would it affect the project? Would it be on hold? Would there going to be a help from a technician to move things forward? In our department, we are trying to help pregnant women by providing technicians during their maternity leave to just help move the technical aspect of the project forward. So these conversations are important, again, not from apologizing or feeling guilty for this, but just for planning things and making sure that the time is spent well.
And one very practical thing I'd like to say, so somebody also asked the question of, which is related, who do you have to disclose the pregnancy to and when? And one thing I would just want to say on that is, obviously there's no obligation until you feel ready, but just from a safety point of view, that's something I was always very concerned when I was still doing lab work. And so you need to be in a place where you feel comfortable that you have somebody you can talk to. You may not be ready to tell your PI, but I would encourage people in that situation to find somebody that they can trust, that they say, what are the risks I need to be aware of early in the pregnancy? Because you may not want to disclose until 3 months, but you may want to discuss that before then. David Smith.
Yeah, in my department, we strongly advise women who are pregnant to do that with somebody they feel they can talk to. As you say, it may not be their PI about it. Obviously, chemical risks to the unborn baby are the greatest in the first trimester of pregnancy. And so there is sense, if you're working on a project in my field of work that's heavy in carcinogens or heavy in radioisotopes, that you're going to want to think very carefully about what you're doing in the laboratory at certain points during the pregnancy. And you really need to put a proper safety plan in place. So we strongly advise people who are pregnant to have that relevant discussion, but it may not be with the PI in the first instance. It would be with somebody that can give good advice on that. But I think would echo that.
The department being public and making a statement about that is very helpful for people to be aware that, you know, if it's a first child, they might not realize that the first 3 months are really critical in this point in terms of safety.
Right.
So that
we're also living in a world in which a lot of people require fertility treatment. And I think during this process, during this time, this is a critical time to also share it with the PI. As a woman going through that or a partner of a woman going through that, this is a difficult time that I think it's critical for the PI to know what is going on.
And that people should not be embarrassed or ashamed. That's something that the more they can talk about it should be made open. Sorry, Margarita, you have something to add?
Very quick, but yeah, I really encourage my people to tell me, I mean, very early on, and I would like to know, because otherwise I feel guilty that they are not being safe. So I think, yeah, as a department, we need that, but as a PI, I think we should try to encourage people to be very honest and very open. It's not just a right, but it's good for everyone trying to have more children in the world. So actually, they should be like congratulated, not.
Okay, David Smith.
Yeah, and I'd add, in my position, which is slightly different, which is the adoptive one, you go through a lot of preparation. If you're considering an adoptive route for having a family, you go through lots of preparation that involves half days off work, full days off work, meetings with social workers. They cut right across your schedule. They can't be put on weekends. They can't be put on evenings. They have to fit around the social workers' schedules. And so again, that's difficult. You may not want to talk to your PI and explain that you're going through this adoption process. You may be rejected. You may be turned down as a parent at that point, but you do need somebody that you can talk to, or to use the flexibility of your workplace to be able to do that. And that can be quite hard to navigate as well, actually.
David Kemp.
just a very minor one based on those comments again. These lists exist, right? What's dangerous in the first trimester? Why aren't they shared around more frequently? Why aren't they just part of the ECR community? Why, like, you know, this is something that's really easy to do. Why don't we make that information available so people, again, can use that information to make the best decisions for themselves?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. So this person says, I've just started my lab 2 years in. I have to leave at 5:30 every day to pick up kids, 11 years and 5 years, and deal with the second job of being a parent. I love the flexible schedule, but I struggle how to impart good work ethic to students and postdocs. I don't want them chained to the bench, but I do want to teach them that sometimes you need to put in the extra time to get things done. I confess I feel guilty that I'm not working 12 hours a day. And how did you manage this early in your careers? David Smith.
I mean, I pick up my son from after school club or school every day, so I'm never here beyond 5 o'clock, and I'm never in before 9 because I do the school run in the morning as well. And I've never asked my group to work outside what they feel are standard working hours. I believe scientific work's about productivity, not hours spent at the bench. So I've never expected or asked my group to work a weekend or work an evening. Of course, there'll be times when experiments run late, and I expect them to finish experiments properly, you know, and to plan their time accordingly to be able to do that. But I prefer to have discussions with my group in terms of their work ethic around productivity than around working hours. And I'd rather see them regularly, see what the progress is, and discuss with them why the progress isn't good enough, rather than talking about why were you not in on a 12-hour day on a particular difficult period. I find that not a fruitful way to manage my team, actually, and I don't think it's good for anybody.
Gayle.
Well, I can't agree more. I'm very much like David, and I don't think there is this notion in science that if you want to be a successful scientist, you need to want to work all the time and to think about science all the time. I think it's super dangerous. I don't think anyone can be productive and focused for 12 hours a day. And I think breaks are super important in order to be creative and to do well. Children force you to stop at some point, but I think even for those who don't have children, living a balanced life and doing other things beyond working in the lab, having social life and exercising, having downtime and breaks, this is really critical. This is the message I give to my lab. Again, of course, sometimes there is a deadline and you have to work extra hours or weekend, but the norm is that you really need to be productive when you are at work and to take breaks and to work reasonable hours, and you can do extremely well. I think you can actually do much better than those who just work around the clock.
David Ken.
So I think for the questioner, it's about being comfortable in your own skin, right? You need to be comfortable. This is your position, and you're delivering on what's expected of you. And as long as you're meeting those requirements, you'll be okay. And so you just need to own that position and know that that's you. But equally, just a quick comment based on what Gayle said. You know, there are different stages for these things, and I did pull those crazy days with crazy experiments when I was in my 20s, and I don't do that now, and that's okay. But equally, there will be people in their PhDs who want to work and who should not be discouraged from working. And I think there's a really difficult balance, because there is a movement towards trying to restrict. I mean, our building tried to impose a no work after 7 o'clock rule, especially if you're on your own. And that's ridiculous in science. You can't do that, right? Like, because some experiments are 4-hour time courses. And if you can't be in doing a 4-hour time course, you can't do that experiment. And so we need to have both sides represented. But I think it's about asserting from, if you're in the lead in a group, you have to assert that everyone needs to be comfortable with what they're doing. And I think David made a really important point. You get judged on progress in a project. You get judged when the complete package is there, not on an individual day where you're here at 8:30 in the morning. And I think that's a very sensible way of approaching things.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Unfortunately, we have to wrap things up there. We're out of time. Thank you all for your time and for sharing such personal experiences. I've really enjoyed the talk, and I hope it's been helpful for some of the attendees. So there will be a Twitter chat afterwards for those of who a few of the speakers are available, and for some of the people listening. So if you're interested, tweet. I think it's up on the screen at eLife Community, and the hashtag is ECR Wednesday. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks.
Bye.